Okay, well, hello everybody, and a very warm welcome to you all. I think probably I must start this lunchtime bite with just offering apologies on behalf of the usual lunchtime bite team who couldn't be with us today. That's Pam Brooke, or as she calls herself very unkindly, I think, Babbling Brooke, but she's currently on holiday. Our master, Margaret, who again isn't part of the team today, but is here with us, and Jeff, our clerk, who again usually joins the team for these lunchtime bites, but isn't with us. So that's well, that's the bad news, and further bad news, really, you've got me to host things today for everybody's sins. I think probably I know most of you, some of you anyway, but my name's John Howard. I did actually work in the industry for, well, some considerable years, as I think will become apparent when I start having a chat with my mate Graham. But I did retire about 3 or 4 years ago, and unlike most things in my life, I think I timed my retirement to perfection, particularly with what seems to have gone on in the industry in the last few years. But anyway, I'm still, I can't pretend, and please forgive me, you may have to forgive me, I'm not in touch with all the day-to-day issues of our industry, but I do retain, from the luxury of my retirement armchair, a very concerned interest on an industry that I enjoyed working in and loved so much for so many years. I think most of you know I worked primarily for the Danish meat and the Danish food industry on the marketing side. That's my background, but that's quite enough about me. And I'd now like to introduce our guest today, Graham Yandell, a good mate of mine for a year or two. Graham is as I know most of you will know, the publisher of Meat Management Magazine and Food Industry Magazine, and under the banner of Yandell Media, who I think personally have done a pretty good job on behalf of this industry. But I do plan to test them a little bit in the next hour or so. And yes, I've been genning up with watching sort of past versions of Andrew Marr and Jeremy Paxman to sharpen up my interview technique. But and indeed I was interested. The publicity promised a grilling of Mr. Yandell. Well, I don't know about a grilling. I think a light grilling, or bleu as they put it in France, rather than bien cuit, cooked to a frazzle, but you be the judge of that. But just firstly, before I start, just a few house rules. I think all of you are on mute, and you have your no video settings. This interview will be recorded, and we now have a Livery YouTube, which will be the home for this interview, and is already the home for the very enjoyable interview with Michelle White from Dawn Meats a few weeks ago. So please visit that afterwards if you want to recall any of what was said. We're planning the interview will be 35 minutes or so. We are going to have an opportunity for questions and answers. And if I could ask you to pop your questions on the chat line, and depending on time available, we'll cover them all, but we'll certainly cover as many as we can at the end of the meeting, at the end of the interview. So please pop them on the chat line if you've got any questions for Graham. And he has promised me that if we don't have time to answer them all, he will deal with them individually, as any good editor would in reply to his readers. But there we are. So Graham Yandell, here you are in the hot seat. And we've known each other a year or two, but a little bird told me, I think, did you originally hail from the West Country? Were you born and bred in the West Country, Graham? Please tell us where you hail from.
Good afternoon, John, and good afternoon to everyone who's joined us. Yes, I'm a West Country boy. I'm a Bristolian. As we would say in Bristol, I'm a Bristolian, my babby. And I moved from Bristol in my mid-teens up to Bedfordshire, following my parents who were in the licence trade. So I spent most of my formative years in the pub, which probably explains quite a lot. Yes, you know, from the West Country, but really, I suppose for most of my adult life, I've either been in the home counties or in London. But I get back to see my family in Weston-super-Mare, as it happens now. I have a few friends in Bristol, but I get back there, and I still have a great attachment to Bristol, which I think is a marvellous city, I have to say. So proud to be a Bristolian, John.
Excellent. Well, Graham, we met, gosh, mid-80s when I joined the meat industry, and you were already very much installed in the media and publishing side of the meat and food industry. And Graham, you must have had, the world was your oyster. You could have gone 101 things you could have done. Why on earth did you end up in the world of media and publishing? What tell us about that.
Well, I left school at 16. You know, I didn't have the opportunity for university, which was much more limited opportunities for people in those days, even if I was bright enough, which I doubt I was. But yeah, I mean, I left school with, actually, I wanted to be a policeman, strangely enough, although some might not think that's strange. It's a great job when you want to boss people around. But I couldn't become a policeman in those days because if you lived on licensed premises, which I did, you were not allowed to become you know, a policeman. So that put pay to that ambition. And I always had a sort of an inkling that I might like to go into advertising or publishing or you know, editing or printing. My father actually was a master printer by trade before he left that. And but I actually started off when I left school in a radio and television shop, selling TVs and radios, which was hugely enjoyable actually. And I was there for about 9 months. And luckily, I saw an advert in the Bedfordshire Times for a planner, you know, a junior in the planning office of the Bedfordshire Times, based in Bedford, of course. And I went for the interview and blagged my way through it, and joined the planning office of the Beds Times, which I have to say was a tremendous part of the Westminster Press Group, which was the largest newspaper provincial group in the country at the time. And obviously at a time when local newspapers were hugely important and hugely successful. And so I started my publishing career at the age of 17. I had some great mentors there. And some of those lessons I learnt as a young whippersnapper are still with me today. You know, it was all about doing things right. Yeah, it was a great sort of grounding, as it were. So that's how I got into publishing, and I was in local newspapers for about 10 years, and quite a successful young working life. I was running a local newspaper by the time I was 21, which was you know, quite unusual even then. And after about 10 years in the industry, I decided I wanted to broaden my horizons, and so I joined the Thompson organisation in what in those days was called Trade and Technical Publishing. We now call it B2B. And I started my publishing career in trade media on something called Big Farm Management and Big Farm Weekly. So I went into the agricultural side of business publishing. And that's how I got into it. And I have to say that my experience and my working life with International Thompson was something which was a marvellous experience. Great organisation, fantastic for training, and some wonderful people.
That's great. Well, Graham, you were already well installed in that area when we met all those years ago, when I think both of us had a little bit more hair than we do today. But I mean, how would you've been an observer, writing about the industry, you've known the industry inside out for 40 odd years. I mean, how have the challenges changed? And you know, what is there anything particularly special about the challenges which the industry face today?
Well, I think, I mean, certainly since I came into the industry in February 1982, and I remember going to the publishing director's office at Northwood House at Thompson's, and he said, "A guy called Cyril Gideon, Yandell, tomorrow you're at Meat Trades Journal," and I thought it was sort of, they were trying to get rid of me, John. Actually, I thought, well, this is a terrible thing. But actually, of course, it was a brilliant opportunity. Meat Trades Journal in those days was #3 in Thompson Business magazines when it came to profitability, or at least it had been, and it was very much on the slide back in those days for a variety of reasons. And my job was to actually, stop that slide and put it back to where it should be. And fortunately, over about an 18-month period, we managed to get Meat Trades Journal back to a vibrant and very profitable publication within Thompson. But I mean, to answer your question, I mean, media over the years has changed. I mean, it's unrecognizable, really. I mean, when I first started at the age of 17, we were still producing newspapers with hot metal, which wasn't, that far away from Caxton. And here we are now, with digital media, social media, electronic media. Literally within a nanosecond, you can have a message in Tokyo, and it's just changed out of all recognition. So I think the main driver is these days, and what you have to be aware of these days, is that people want to have their information delivered to them in the way they want it. Traditionally it was always, well, you produce something, you thought you did the right thing, and out it went. But these days, the reader, the end user, if you will, has a lot more control, a lot more say about the way they want information delivered and the way they want to see it. And indeed, you've even got now mini publishers, with their mobile phones, they've got followers and they've got influencers and so on. So of course, the whole outlook for media has changed, and it is unrecognizable. I mean, let alone television. We no longer sort of have the white dot in the evening and stand up and to the national anthem and so on, as it was in my boyhood. You've got 24-hour TV, you've got more stations than you care to shake a stick at. And I have to say, John, that I don't necessarily think that's been to the material improvement in some areas of, what we see. They say you get the media you deserve. Well, if that's true, I don't know what we've done wrong, but some of our media provision these days is, pretty much below par, I think. And there are lots of reasons for that. But I think people certainly know what they want. Life is faster paced. They have different delivery. We all know about the demise of local newspapers, because people want to see their information in a different way. You've only got to go shopping to see people walking around with their face buried in their phones as they walk around. So it's completely different to when I first came in, and it was 69. And the challenge is obviously to adapt and change as the market adapts and changes, and being in the forefront of that. And it's the same in trade media as it is in national media. Things change, and you've just got to try and keep abreast of that and be part of the innovation when it comes to that, if you can.
That's fascinating, Graham. I mean, are the days of print media numbered, do you think, or will there always be people like me who like to pick up a newspaper? And are we a dying breed? Well, of course we are, but
interesting question, John. I think I don't think the days of print media are numbered. No, I think though we are facing changing times and have been for some considerable time. I mean, I remember, to give an example, going back many years ago, and people would say to me, "Oh, exhibitions have had their day. Are they finished?" And my answer to that in those days was actually bad exhibitions have had their day. And I would say the same about print media. Bad print media has had its day, and we've seen a lot of print media go over the last few years. We have certain philosophies in terms of content and quality. I mean, I think the most important thing for us is to make sure that we produce products that have great content and presented in a way which is attractive with a good quality, a good aesthetic, if you like, making sure that it's absolutely relevant. I mean, this isn't rocket science, but good publications, I think, will stay with us. But of course, if you take something like meat management, as well as a range of other things that we do, you can access that online as an e-magazine. It's very interactive. We have things like Article View, which is a way that you can read articles and features and so on very easily from the magazine on your mobile or your tablet or on your PC or whatever it may be. So of course, all of that has evolved. But I do think that good quality print publications are part of the mix of information that people can receive. But if you don't want to read it in print, well, that's fine. You can read it in another way. And so it comes back to my original point. People have a better idea of how they want to receive their information. The most important thing, I think, for us publishers, us people in media, and of course, I'm now in media. When I first started, I was in publishing. We're a lot more sexy these days. We're in media. But the thing that you've got to do is keep it relevant, and you've got to be the required reading of people. And you've got to really work hard at making sure that what you're delivering is what your reader wants. And very often, in my experience, the reader doesn't know what he or she wants until you give it to them. So you're constantly, obviously, evaluating that and hopefully staying relevant to your target market.
Yeah, interesting times. Graham, let's perhaps move on specifically now to the meat industry. And I don't think any observers could possibly come to any other conclusion. The meat industry has not always enjoyed the best press in the last few years. And I'd like to hear your views on that. And in particular, do you think, have we been effective in dealing with, I would call it anti-meat propaganda almost? Have we done that well? What could we have done better? But perhaps you could just, as very much an observer of this phenomenon, could you, I'd want to hear your view about the current image of the industry and how we can do things a bit better.
Well, it's a big question, John, isn't it? And it's a question that we are all conscious of. I may be a bit controversial in saying this, but I think one of the worst things that happened to the industry was the demise of MLC. If you go back, MLC was created to promote red meat back in the 50s and obviously in the 60s and 70s and so on and onwards. And it actually met its end really through Mr. Blair and co, who brought in devolution, and MLC eventually followed suit, and we ended up with Eblex, which is since gone, thanks to our friends at AHDB, BPEX, which on the pig meat side, which again is gone. You've got Quality Meat Scotland, they do a great job. You've got HCC, Meat Promotion Wales, do a great job. I mean, they really do a great job. There must be some duplication of resources in doing that, which I think is a question. But I do think that an organised, we always used to say about MLC, if it wasn't around, you'd want to invent it. The problem is of course, it was a political quango, and is there the political will these days to support what is, after all, a huge industry and an important employer and an important contribution to the UK economy? And it's nice to hear actually our friend George Eustice saying that ministers are not anti-meat, which he said, quote, recently, and that's very refreshing to hear, because sometimes one does wonder where the political will is to support the meat industry. You've got vested interests these days. They have a lot more effective platforms to put across their fairly narrow viewpoint. We should remind ourselves, I think, from time to time, that around 96% of people in the UK still eat meat and enjoy it and have the health-giving benefits that it provides. I often ask people, John, when we're talking about things like this, what's the percentage, do you think, of vegans in the UK or vegetarians in the UK? And most of the answers I get are around about 15 to 20%. and they're somewhat staggered to find that vegans are around about 1% and fairly consistent, and vegetarians are around about 3% and fairly consistent. And it goes to prove that they've been particularly effective in, as a small element in society, banging a big drum. AHDB, I think, is doing more these days than it has done hitherto to support the meat-eating message. And I think AHDB has certainly been going through lots of changes over the years, sort of finding out really what its role is, and in my view, became somewhat more pro-farming than pro-meat industry, for quite some period. But as I say, going back, I think the fact that we don't have an overall organisation, focusing specifically on meat and meat promotion. I mean, if you look back to the BSE situation, where would we have been without MLC, supporting and championing the industry? So I do think that we have a problem because largely, apart from the trade bodies, and some of them do a great job, they really, really do, and from the individual companies, it's not a joined up industry from a PR point of view. And marketing, John, as you know, is all about perception. And if the perception is that, meat isn't good for you or whatever, and that's stoked by a media which is more than willing to stoke that message, because there are people within media that have their own drum to bang. And I would say that, the BBC, I think in particular, I think is an organisation which should look within itself as to its balance when it comes to coverage. We've got a great story in this country for meat, a great story. But I don't honestly think that we have a particularly cohesive way of putting our story across. And that's something which, remains a problem. And what the answer is, I'm not sure. I mean, we can talk to the industry, as we do. I mean, our job is not just to report the industry. Our job is to support the industry. But, we're talking to an audience which is already on side. Getting the message out to consumers, and young people in particular, is a big ask. And, certainly we must look to people like AHDB to help, with that process. And I'm glad to see that they are doing a lot more these days than they were for some time.
As I say, I'm not in touch with day-to-day issues in the industry now, Graham, but I think a lot of what you say makes a lot of sense. But do you get any sort of feeling that things are moving a little bit now? We are seeing, I mean, the essence of any meat industry coverage 3 or 4 years ago was stop eating meat, you live longer and save the planet, end of story. And, how can I dramatize that to best effect? But do you get a sense now, are you aware of more, more of our these balanced messages that I think, nothing is black and white these days. And the role of livestock, the nutritional value of meat versus, other foods is, it is a highly complex issue. And do you feel that there's perhaps the thing is starting to turn a little bit more balanced?
I think there are elements. I mean, it's interesting. There are various people that are exploding the myth about plant-based foods. I mean, if ever there was a description of a product which is misleading, it's plant-based foods. We should call them chemical-based foods, I think, most of the time, because many of them have more chemicals than you would really wish to see on a food ingredients list. I mean, I would certainly much prefer to have a grass-fed, rib steak than I'm going to eat plant food with a whole list of various ingredients. But of course, and we've covered this in meat management, supermarkets are selling plant-based products, not because, with the greatest respect to them, that they're particularly interested in the health of the nation, although they would say they are, but they're much more profitable. I mean, making products from some of the ingredients that are supposed to be meat alternatives are cheap products, and then they sell them at a high premium. So the profit between them is very high indeed. So you can't blame the supermarkets for wanting to fill up shelves full of products they make more money on. Having said that, to answer your question, I think that more and more people are becoming aware that these products are not necessarily all they're marked up to be. I mean, frankly, I like to eat food because I enjoy it. And I've tried a number of these products. I have to say there are very few of them that I could say to you, yes, I really enjoyed that, or I thought that was a nice thing to eat. I mean, one of the great pleasures of life is eating great food. And, and this thing where people have to make a statement about what they eat, or put themselves in a box, to be, I'm a this or I'm a that. I mean, the problem we face, I think, and it goes back to your earlier question, is that food is now part of fashion. It was interesting, wasn't it, that when we had lockdown and we had COVID, and so on, that people, were returning more to meat eating for the comfort, that it gave them. The fact that they enjoyed it, they wanted to have the pleasure of eating these great products. But we have a lot more now in the realm of food fashion, and we have the so-called food police that can always tell us what's good for us. But the great British public actually vote with their feet. They like meat. I mean, my dear mother always used to say that our family was a big meat-eating family. And this was sort of, coming out from the war and the 50s and so on and so forth. And of course, if you go back, meat was not something that you could get easily or particularly cheaply. And, by saying that we were great meat eaters, she was saying, we're doing okay. We're doing very well. Now, of course, in society as it stands, with high disposable incomes, a fickle media, and people that have the opportunity of choice, I mean, we have all sorts of foodstuffs being flown to us from all over the world. And some of it is absolutely crazy. I'm getting green beans from Kenya, for goodness sake. What's all that about? So I think that the bottom line is that, people, there are more people that are influenced by fashion these days, and what they're told they should eat, than actually going out and eating great food that you enjoy. And of course, like with everything in life, have a balanced approach to it. That's the thing. Have a balanced approach. I don't think anybody in the meat industry that I know would say you should only eat meat rather. People know you have a balanced diet. That is what we would advocate. But there are a lot of people out there that will, for their own purposes, put out a huge amount of misinformation. And it comes back to your point about how do we deal with that? Well, we've just got to keep banging our drum and keep putting out our positive messages and keep making great products.
Yeah, we've got to walk the walk, talk the talk.
Absolutely.
Walk. I'd be very interested. I was listening to the Today programme this morning, and tomorrow the BBC Auntie, who haven't always been our best friends, are actually at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning on Radio 4, that there is a programme called Plant-Based Promises, and I think it's going to be quite interesting to see what editorial line they take, whether we'll find yet again we'll be on the defensive. I don't know who they're speaking to how much balance they will seek to introduce the program, but I'll certainly tune in to see what happens. I guess the problem is that balance this, balance that, it's not sexy enough really as a message, and to me, I think the good food, the essence of our message is about good food, considerately and more so sustainably produced. I think we've got to work a lot harder on demonstrating there is a lot of progress being made in producing food more sustainably, and as an industry where I think everybody has got their antennae out now. We need to do that, and we need to promote ourselves better. But perhaps we can just move on a bit. Graham, could I ask you, what is your favorite meat dish?
My favorite meat dish? That's an interesting question. I think I've got to say it's my wife Sharon. She does a wonderful roast chicken Sunday lunch, and I guess if I was going to order my last meal, it would be Sharon's roast chicken Sunday lunch, which I love. I enjoy eating meat, John, of all sorts, but yeah, that roast chicken dinner would be my favourite for sure.
And what about your favourite vegan dish, Mr. Yandell? What's your favourite vegan dish?
Probably a bacon sandwich, John, I imagine, you know, because most of them, you know, have the odd bacon sandwich and don't admit to it. I don't have one. I mean, I like all food, and I come back to this crazy thing these days where people want to align themselves as being something, you know, and it's crazy, but it's the world in which we live. But no vegan or vegetarian specialities, but I like all food. I just don't put a.
So I can't put you in the flexitarian box then, Mr. Yandell.
Well, you can if you say meat and 2 veg is flexitarian, John.
Well, I mean, every now and again I have a BLT rather than a bacon butty, and I'm seriously considering buying I am a flexitarian T-shirt to wear, because, you know, I think that is ample evidence of. But
John,
let's talk good food. Let's talk good food, not good T-shirts.
If you do that, John, I think you should definitely wear it to butcher's hall to a court lunch. I'm sure the master would not object to that at all.
Yes, well, I don't think I'll try that, but yeah, well, unless I feel a little bit mischievous, which I do occasionally. But we are I mean, obviously, a very key issue, a key challenge for the livestock industry is to produce and demonstrate that we are producing sustainably. But perhaps I can sort of switch over a bit and ask you, as a publisher, Mr. Yandell, what are you doing to make your business more sustainable and more in keeping, perhaps, with some of you know, the modern zeitgeists around that we confront?
Interesting question. I mean, I would just comment, John, that, and again, I'm sure I'm going to get criticised for saying this, but I do think that some of the emphasis on sustainability and animal welfare and you name it, and it's incredibly important, and I'm not, you know, diminishing that at all, but I also think there's a great danger of us contemplating on navel somewhat. You know, believe me, not everybody that goes out and buys the weekly shop is that interested. They're interested perhaps in what they're spending. They're interested in how they can feed their family. And very often the choices are about feeding the family rather than worrying about, you know, if it came from the left field on, you know, the upland farm or whatever it may be, and the cow's name was Daisy. You know, so I think that we overthink that sometimes. I'm not saying it's not important. Of course it's important, and I'm not diminishing that at all. But in our own business, we've been proactive in terms of, I mean, there are issues that we all have to address. So some time ago, we swapped over from single-use plastic on our wrappers for magazine to compostable wrap, which was and remains a sizable investment, so that every time you unwrap one of our magazines, and not just in the meat industry, but in the other industries that we serve, you can put it with the garden waste or the food waste, and it's compostable. We also have a policy here where you know, we've reduced to all our single-use plastic wherever we can. You know, even down to the drinks machines, where people are issued with their own water bottle with their name on it, and they can reuse it, and all the rest of it. So we are very much trying to make sure, and of course, delivering information via newsletters online and by website and so on. So a lot of electronic media is used in terms of the way that we actually send information to our readers, as well as the print side. And as I say, on print, you know, we also have the e-magazine. So in fact, we give our readers and those who want to become readers a choice about how they want to receive the information that we're providing for them. But we're certainly and of course, the magazines themselves are all printed on, you know, recycled paper, all paper which is, you know, climate friendly. So right the way through the process, we are making sure. And one of the reasons we do that, apart from just a responsible attitude, is that a lot of our advertisers obviously want us to do that. I mean, they have policies where, and readers, they have policies where they have to watch their carbon footprint. And we find increasingly now that some of our advertisers will say, well, what is your policy? Will it fit in with our policy on what we're trying to do with the use of plastic and so forth? So that investment is something which is very much to the benefit of the people that use us and that we work with. So I'd like to feel that we've done pretty much everything that we can to place ourselves in a position where people feel comfortable in what we're producing for them.
Thank you, Graham. Well, that sounds very proactive. You're certainly aware of the challenges I think that any business faces today, more than aware, Graham. But can I just ask you now, 40 years, are there any? Could you just name 3, 4, 5 outstanding leaders that you have met over the years that caught your attention and really should be an example to all of us in our work?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I've met and I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of great people. The one thing about the meat industry, of all the industries that I've been involved with, but I have to say, I love the meat industry. I think it's a great industry. I think the people are great. I've met a lot of characters over the years, some brilliant characters, and I think many of us would agree with that. Not perhaps quite as many characters around as there used to be, but it's a great industry and it's a great people business. I mean, certainly within the industry, I remember with great fondness John Locke of what was the BMA, the predecessor of the BMPA. John was a great guy, and I always thought he was a tremendous ambassador for the industry. I mean, coming up more up to date, I think Norman Bagley does an outstanding job. Norman's known for his forthright opinions, and he really does champion. I think AIMS as an organisation has done an awful lot to challenge some of the misconceptions and the misinformation that has gone out. And likewise, I would say Nick Allen at the BMPA does a great job for us these days in being an ambassador and challenging some of these things and making sure that our messages are getting across. I mean, outside of the industry, I mean, I also remember George Adams. I was a great fan of George Adams. Again, a bit of a character, George, but I always admired George. I thought he was a great guy, and really was somebody that lived in and breathed the industry. Outside of the industry, I mean, my publishing mentor was Roy Thompson, Lord Thompson of Fleet, who started the Thompson organisation after he was 60, can you believe? And by the time he died in his mid-80s, I think it was worth about 4 billion. So I've not done that, but he was a tremendous mentor, and a number of other. I mean, I think the thing for me, John, is over the years, I've always tried to be with really good, bright people and listen to what they say and try to soak in what they say and learn from them. And I was very lucky, particularly at the Thompson organisation, and prior to that with Westminster Press, but with Thompson's, I worked with some really outstanding people, and I always tried to listen and take in and then convert that into the way I might use it. People like Jim Merchant and Julian Marshall, who was a liveryman. Some people may remember Julian, Malcolm Bridges, people that were great. And outside of that, in my family, my mother and my grandfather, were great inspirations to me. And so yeah, I've been extremely lucky to have known some great people. And many I haven't mentioned, but over the years, yeah, it's been a joy to actually in my sort of job to meet so many great people and to benefit from their experience.
Well, certainly, Graham, I can endorse some of the selections you've made, and certainly people that I have come into contact with over the years. Absolutely. Now, turning from back to you again, Graham. I'm just going to ask you a simple question. I mean, what would you describe as the main highlight of your career in the last 40 years or so?
In the meat industry,
Yes.
Well, there are several, I guess, John. I mean, I very much enjoyed being the festival chairman of the BDCI. I think that was about 92, 93. So going back a bit now, that was terrific. A great year. And actually, I spoke at Butchers Hall during that year as the guest, and I was proposed by a guy called, you remember, called Ken Clements, who was such again a great guy, Ken, and another person I remember with great fondness from the industry. So being festival chairman, I was a director of Meatex in more of its early days, when it was a sort of combined effort of people to put on a trade show for the trade, and it was hugely successful. And I'd like to feel I played my part in helping with that, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So those two things, I think, in the industry. I mean, obviously starting the business, becoming publisher of Meat Trade Journal, which was back in '82, and as I say, came as a bit of a surprise. But I had a wonderful time doing that, and I left in '86 after being made publisher in '82. And bought a local newspaper in Milton Keynes, sold that fairly quickly afterwards for a nice profit, just to a guy called Keith Barwell, and then started the business. And back in August 1986, our first edition was for Meat Magazine, and it was November 1986, and we've been doing various things since. So I think obviously that was a highlight as well, in terms of being able to have the opportunity to start a business and produce media the way that I felt it should be done. Whether I've done everything I wanted to, while I had that blank piece of paper to start with, I don't know, but I think we can be reasonably happy. And I would say that we have helped to change the face of meat industry media over those 40 years. I hope for the better. It's been an absolute joy to be part of this wonderful industry.
Well, that's great, Graham. Well, I concur with an awful lot of that, I can tell you. Graham, what about away from your desk? I can see Jimmy Greaves winking at me in the photograph behind your desk. And tell us about some of your interests. Well, I'm outside of the office.
I'm in my office at the moment, and yeah, you're quite right. I've got Jimmy behind me, and a signed shirt from him up here. I've got Tom Finney up here. I've got a shirt to me signed by Jeff Hurst from the World Cup of '66. Of course, Jimmy was a guest of ours at one of our Meat Awards, as indeed was Jeff. I have an England shirt from my nephew, Craig, who when he played for England Colts, on my wall here. So yeah, I like sport. Away from the office, I guess my interest in music. I love music. Play a bit of guitar, gardening. I like to do a bit of gardening and reading. I like to read political biography and history. And on holiday, the odd bit of fiction. Like everybody, John Grisham or something. To take my mind off things. But yeah, I do read every day if I get a chance, and certainly music plays a big part in my life. Not a day goes by when I'm not listening to quite a wide range of different music. So yeah, those are my interests. But of course, when you run your own business, the main sort of predisposition you have every day is the business, and that still remains with me. And people say, what are your hobbies? Well, I guess the hobby is the business, really. It remains that way. Right.
Well, Graham, thanks for that. I'm now going to, before we wrap things up for the day, we've had a lot of questions, and apologies to everybody because we won't have time for them all, but I'm just going to cherry pick, if you can just bear with me, one or two. And the first one is from Roger Kelsey. Would you enter publishing if you had your time again? Do you think the uni route to publishing is relevant today? is this the route you took to publishing? Is the route that you took to publishing the best route? So,
well, thank you, Roger. Yes, I don't think I would change anything really. It's been a fantastic career. I think one is always very lucky when you fall into a career which you enjoy. I was only talking to my grandson yesterday and saying, because he's at GCSE time coming up next year, and I said to him, you really need to try and follow a career that you like. There's nothing worse than going to work every day and doing something that you don't enjoy. So I think I was very fortunate to fall into something at the age of 17, which I'm still doing and I'm still enjoying. I must admit, I didn't see the extent of the changes that have come in my world of business to the same level, and there's certainly a lot of changes, a lot of challenges coming up for our type of business. Yes, it's difficult. I mean, I didn't go to university. We didn't have the opportunities quite then as young people do now. I encourage people to go to university. I encourage that. I think it's a great thing. And my son Rob, who's been on the court of the Worcester Company of Butchers, he studied media, had a gap year in Australia, had a great start before coming into the business. So I think that, the same with my daughter, who's now deputy head of Harrow International School in Hong Kong, and she went through, she went through acting school in Birmingham School of Acting, and then postgrad at Goldsmiths. And I think they've had fantastic lives. So in a way, I regret not having the university opportunity, but I wouldn't change anything. And I think that certainly, as I said to you, I was running a newspaper by the time I was 21. You wouldn't get that opportunity again, probably. It was a bit of a unique time. I think if you're big enough, you're old enough. And if you should always judge people on their ability and not their age. But I think the university route is a great opportunity for people, and as long as they make the most of it and not just spend most of the time in the bar, which is probably what I would do.
I spent a little bit of time in the bar at university, Graham.
You're a highly educated man, John. So I mean,
you've got to have a little taste of everything. Anyway, just another question here, sort of picking up on, I think, some of your remarks about how effective the is the meat industry's response to, well, I loosely call it the anti-meat propaganda. What about the Eat Meat Alliance with AHDB, HCC and QMS? Is it effective? What would make it more effective?
I think it's a really good idea. I think they've done some great work, and what would make it more effective is more money. Simple as that. You've got to have the resources to put into marketing, into engaging, getting the right messages out to the market. So I think that with the somewhat limited funds that we have these days, and compared to, if you go back to MLC, I think Gwyn Howells, again, Liveryman Gwyn Howells, great job when he was at MLC, had the Love campaign, did a brilliant marketing job, and again, I really admire Gwyn. I thought he did a fantastic job. So I think the alliance is a great thing. What would improve it is more money. But I still come back to my somewhat controversial point that I think the demise of MLC in the way that it was designed to operate, I think was a mistake. I think you do need to have a body design, not talking about potatoes, not talking about dairy, not talking about horticulture. You need an organization focused on the meat industry, which, goodness me, is big enough, to actually coordinate things properly. And when I think back to the sort of budgets that the MLC had, my goodness me, if only we had those these days. But unfortunately, those days have gone. But they do a great job, John, a great job.
Good, that's reassuring to hear. I've now got a question from our master, Margaret. Graham, we are addressing meat specifically. I would be interested in your thoughts on the fifth quarter, particularly offal.
Well, firstly, we don't eat enough of it. That's a very interesting question, because it should be adding value. I mean, we have our awards, as you know, and one of the things that we do, we have a Young Manager of the Year award, and we have some absolutely outstanding candidates. And I remember talking to one going back a few years ago, who'd actually come up with the idea of taking pig's ears and turning them into pet food treats, and that suddenly became £1 million a year business. I think that certainly offal is a great product. It's a health-giving product, and I think that certainly people should be encouraged to eat more offal than they are now. But where do you find it? I mean, in as much, where is it promoted? You have to create anything in selling. You have to create the desire. You have to sell the benefits, and I don't see us doing that as an industry. And if you want to encourage people to buy something, you've got to create the desire in the first place. And I don't remember seeing any sort of campaign about eating offal and how good it is for you and how tasty it can be. We used to eat plenty of it some years ago, but it seems to be, again, not a fashion item these days. But at the end of the day, it does add value to the carcass, and certainly in terms of exports, there are great markets for the fifth quarter in countries that will eat things that we don't necessarily like as a nation. And again, one would like to think that we're putting resources into that, to send fifth quarter products to the countries that want to eat them or to use them. I don't know if I answered the question, but
Well, I'll leave that to the person who posed it to get in touch if they weren't. But no, I'm a great fan of fifth quarter, and I think I've just come back from a few days in France where I have family, and they delight in parts of the carcass that we sort of tend to regard rather sniffily, I think. And but I've enjoyed some wonderful fifth quarter based meals, if I can call them that, in France, and perhaps more so than here. But I think it is changing now. I think people are. I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, fun. Just again, sort of slightly revisiting a theme that we've had, but a question from Pamela Brook. I think we all know Pamela quite well, don't we? You do, Graham. What does Graham see as the main priority for the meat industry today, in the light of the economic, environmental, and growing plant-based narrative? So let's finish on that question, Graham.
Typically small question there from Pam. I mean, we could spend all day talking about this one, John, couldn't we? I think it's really important that we keep our credentials up there. I mean, the meat industry is incredibly resilient. I can't think of another industry that would have dealt with the issues that we've had over the last few years, the last decades. I mean, BSE, foot and mouth, Horsegate, I mean, all of those things, we came through, and it just shows the resilience of the product. And so I think that we've got to keep pushing out these messages. We've got to be challenging the misinformation. We've got to be prepared to take on those people in the media that want to sort of put out messages which are incorrect. I mean, the BBC is a very good example. We had that program, was it last year, when we had the reporter flying over the feedlots of Brazil and whatever, with a tear in the eye, talking about the meat, and in fact it had no relationship to our meat industry here in the UK whatsoever. Was that qualified by the BBC? Of course not, because there's an agenda there, which is very different, and it's weak editing, by editors. It's irresponsible, and it's actually allowing people in to with an axe to grind to put out messages which are anti-meat, because that's their particular viewpoint. So I think we've got to make sure that people like AIMS and BMPA and all the others, and AHDB, are as resourced as they can be to get out there and make sure that our positive messages are being put out to the public, and to make sure that the misinformation is challenged. But we are woefully short of resources to do that, unfortunately. And it comes back to my original point, but we've just got to keep banging that drum. And remember that, yes, you know, traceability and the environment and all the rest of it, incredibly important. But people should eat our product because they like it, because, you know, they feel better for eating it. They enjoy it. They consider it to be value. And I'm not talking about cheap. I think the day of cheap meat is gone, you know, but I think good value, great products that people enjoy, want to eat, and you know, we've just got to keep pushing that message out there. We're going to keep trying to do it from our perspective, but of course, as I say, John, we are preaching to the converted to a certain extent, but we can help people, hopefully, you know, with the messages, with the information, to put those messages out to their customers as well.
Well, Graham, thank you very much indeed. I think the essence of your message is that there are plenty of challenges around. There are probably lots of things we can do a bit better, but fundamentally, there is the resilience there. And I think some of the sort of pessimistic scenarios that have been attributed to the meat industry, I think have been over elaborated, if I can put it diplomatically. And I think there are reasons for a good future if we're prepared, and we do need to up our game. I think that's certainly your message to us today, Graham. Thank you very much. Well, just before we wrap up, I'm going to the Lunchtime Bite is going to morph into a real old favorite program of certainly mine, and I know many others, Desert Island Discs. So Graham, as a mark of our thanks to you and our appreciation, we intend to ship you off to a desert island in the next few weeks, and I'm going to morph into Lauren Laverne, or I'm probably more Roy Plumley than Lauren Laverne, but I'm going to ask you to. You've already declared an interest in music. We haven't got time, unfortunately, to play your 8 favorite records, but of the 8 which you've selected, Mr. Yandell, which is your favorite? What's the favorite record, the one you'll play most when you arrive on that desert island?
Oh my goodness me. John, I think that's an impossible question because I have such a wide range of choices of music. You know, everything from Puccini through to The Who, you know, with the Shadows and the Beatles thrown in between. So difficult question to answer. I think if I had to have one,
yeah, that's what I'm asking you.
Just one. I would probably say Your Tiny Hand is Frozen from La Boheme by Puccini. I think that probably would be my if it was the only thing I could listen to, because I wouldn't get fed up with that at all.
Okay. Well, reading, we're going to let you have a copy of the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, and the works of Shakespeare. And when you finish reading those, which will probably take you a while, you can message me with information about your favorite book that you would like. And I will notify Amazon and arrange a delivery as soon as we can. So which favorite book are you going to tell me when you've read all the other stuff that we're going to give you to read? What's your favorite book, Mr. Yandell?
Well, I don't have a favorite, John. I have lots and lots of favorites. And I again, my reading material is very wide and very diverse. It really, really is. But if I had to just have a book as a luxury, I think I would have a compendium of Rumpole of the Bailey by Sir John Mortimer. I think that's what I mean. I do love, Rumpole of the Bailey. I think is brilliant, and if people haven't read that, it really is a treat. Brilliant. Sometimes politically incorrect these days, I have to add, but it's wonderfully written, wonderful stories, and I think that would be my choice. A nice compendium of Rumpole stories.
Excellent choice, and nothing wrong with a bit of political incorrectness, if I might say. And finally, Mr. Yandell, you have a luxury item. Tell us, what luxury item would you like to take with you?
That's an easy one, John, actually. I think that if I had one luxury on my desert island, I would take my Marvin Fender red and white Stratocaster, hopefully with a solar-powered amplifier. But certainly my red and white Fender Strat, which is the customized one from Hank Marvin. Hank I just think is marvelous, and was my inspiration for starting to play the guitar when I was about 10. So that would definitely be my my luxury item, and I would try to improve my skills.
Well, we will allow that. We will allow you to take that with you, Mr. Yandell. And really, to everybody, thank you all for listening in on this. And I think a big thank you to Graham, who's opened up very generously to us on a wide range of subjects. So I'll now draw this lunchtime bite to a close. And
John, sorry, before you do that, as Master of the Worshipful Company of Butchers, can I just say thank you to you for hosting, and Graham, thank you for your honesty as ever. Say it how it is, which is what we love about you. And I have to say, I always come away from these things learning something. And why haven't we heard you play the guitar at Butchers Hall? That has to be my question to you.
Well, I've come close a couple of times, Margaret. We have played in the days when we were a bit of a rock and roll band. We've played at BDCI events and raised money, but never at Butchers Hall. You know, it's a delight I've managed to avoid so far.
Well, that might change, Graham, because you know we've now opened a pub in Butchers Hall, the Jubilee Arms. So perhaps we can get you to do a turn in the pub at Butchers Hall.
Well, it would be a quick way of emptying the pub, I think.
Gentlemen, thank you both very much. It's much appreciated, and it's been very interesting.
That's a pleasure. And Margaret, I'm not the best guitar player in the world, but I am cheap. So, you know, hopefully.
And enthusiastic, Graham.
Enthusiastic, absolutely. It's been a great pleasure to do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret.